Thank you for staying with us. Sacha, before the break, we're talking about the ACCA male pygmies and putting the baby to their nipple when mum was not around. What other animals in the dad world out there with babies take on a more nurturing role?
Yeah, well, you mentioned the seahorses before. It's the males that get pregnant and then have, I think it's somewhere around a dozen foals. And
what do they call them?
I think they're called foals.
Okay.
Just, this research I did about a year ago now, so you're testing my memory, and my memory's not great. I'm a father. And they raise them, spend the first while raising them. There are birds. Birds are often, the men are often very clucky too. And sometimes men, the dads, pair up with other men to raise the young.
Are you talking about the penguins?
Of course, they're very the penguins, the emperor penguins from Antarctica. They've been in the talked about a bit lately. There was the March of the Penguins, of course, and the males there are incredibly clucky and do a lot of the work where they make their big trek across the ice and incubate the eggs on their feet for several months. It turns into as the mums take off to the sea to fish and eat, and they need to get that strength from the food so that they can then breastfeed. I think I've got that right. When they get back and raise the little ones,
because the dads put their belly over the.
That's right.
Because the happy feet that.
Exactly, happy feet's another. Yeah, the emperor penguins have been flavour of the month.
They have indeed.
Yeah, down at my local restaurant anyway. No, I'm sorry.
Avoid that one.
No, we'll cut that out later in the editing room.
So, what other animals that the males take on a fairly supportive role?
Yeah, well, look, they're the ones that pop to mind. Let's see.
You've got the seahorses.
Yep.
The ACCA pygmies. The penguins. I know there's a lot of other fish critters.
Yeah, the fish are good too. And there are, at the other end of the spectrum, some of the say elephants. They're not so considered great dads. They're not going to win any great dad awards. In a lot of cases, the males can be ostracised from the herd when they become dads, and there's been known to be some infanticide with elephants. And look, that's not really my area of expertise, and in the book that forms a small part, and it's really just to put into perspective some of the I guess my own experiences, and it is largely about humans and how we raise babies. I'm certainly no expert on the animal kingdom.
It's quite interesting, isn't it?
It's very interesting.
So back to delivery room. Are you pleased you actually went into the delivery room with Joe?
Yeah, very much so.
Would you recommend it?
I would. I'd recommend it very highly. I guess, the fact that delivery ward trauma seems to exist would say to me that it's probably good to be aware that this could happen. On the one hand, I'm tempted to say to people who are about to become dads, think about that. On the other hand, I'd be tempted to say, don't even mention it to them. When you're about to become a dad, you've got things to worry about anyway. And I think sometimes you can build up fears by anticipating them. You can create fears almost. For me, being in the delivery room was an overwhelmingly positive experience. In retrospect, largely. At the time, it was quite traumatic, just because things weren't going to plan. As I started to say before, we were induced, and then Edie just didn't want to come. She wasn't ready. She probably would have stayed in for another week, I think. So the drugs that we used in induction, we ramped up. The hospital ramped up and more, so the pain became more and more unbearable, which led to other forms of intervention. And this is quite a common story, apparently. And we were looking like Joe was going to need an emergency cesarean, and so that whole process, from my perspective, where I can't do anything, I'm just sort of hand holding and providing reassurance, was terribly confronting. But then in the end, all went very well. Edie was born without an emergency cesarean, and everyone was healthy and well. And it was this overwhelmingly positive experience. something that was very traumatic and difficult that had this euphoric ending. All's well that ends well. You know, it's this marvelous occasion, and it really did. It made me love my wife more than I ever have. It's hard to fathom how a person can go through this for you, the collective you know, for the family that you're starting to build.
So, what, in hindsight, what do you wish, there may have been nothing, that you did know now that you've been through the journey? What do you wish that you had have known beforehand that you then discovered for yourself? Or
that's a very big question. But we live in an age where there's so much information and you learn so much, and sometimes that's great. You know, knowledge is power, as a lot of people say, but other times we know too much, and we know too much about details. I would say I wish more people had took me aside and said, look, don't worry, it'll be fine. But having said that, if they'd told me that, I probably wouldn't have believed them, you know, because you don't know what's coming. I'd like people to say, look, it's going to be hard, but you'll manage, you'll make mistakes. Everyone does, and the little critters are tougher than you think. They seem completely defenceless. And I think it's in evolution's and nature's interest to make parents think that their young are so incredibly precious that they could just die if you breathe on them incorrectly. But really, it's also in nature's interest to make them quite resilient. And, you know, some of the midwives say you can drop them and they'll bounce. But you will make mistakes as a parent, you know, you will. And hopefully you'll get better if you have more kids or just over time.
Back to actually talking more about the effect that this book has had on couples. You were sharing about a letter that you received a few weeks after it had been published. What was that?
Yeah, that's right. Well, an extract from the book was published in the Sun Herald, in Sunday Life. I do most of my work for the Sydney Morning Herald, but occasionally for the Sun Herald as well. And this extract was about sex after childbirth. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of the content of that chapter was comments from people on the blog. And so it ended up going off on all sorts of tangents and to me, really providing a fairly broad examination of that topic. And I guess if I don't know if there was a message to it, but maybe one of the things that people took from it was that a wide variety of things can happen to a couple's sex life. I feel like our lives have fallen apart a little bit. You know, is this normal? And hopefully by writing that chapter and by having that extract printed, it made people feel that a little bit more. And a few weeks after the extract was published in the magazine, there was a letter that said, look, thank you for this article, you're saving our marriage. You know, and that just made me feel fantastic. Because it just made this woman who wrote in, and made her feel as if, look, all the stuff that's happening to us, our sex life has gone through some difficulties since our babies arrived, but we're now talking about it a bit more, in part thanks to that article, because we realise that a lot of people have differing and difficult experiences of sex after childbirth.
Okay, we'll take another break and come back for the last part of our conversation with Sacha and explore this a little bit more, and also that jealousy thing that dads may experience. Stay with us.